Hi guys! So today I wanted to talk about my work planner and my personal planner. If you've seen any of my other videos, you probably know that I have about 50 million different planners, and you're probably wondering how I could possibly single out two of them. But in actual fact, my other planners are really just either trackers or logs of some kind, like a gratitude journal, a food tracker, or a kind of satellite planner like my home planner where I record things that I already have in one of my two main planners. So really, if you kind of boiled it down to the essentials, I only actually have two planners. This one, my work planner, and this one, my personal planner. And if I needed to, I could do a 2-book July. I don't think I could do a 1-book July, but if I absolutely had to, I could get away with these 2 books. So I just wanted to talk about why I like the division between work and personal and the different types of things that I keep in each one and where the overlap is and what I keep separate. So a little bit of history. For years, I only had one planner, which I think is probably typical for a lot of people before they enter the planner community. It just never occurred to me to have more than one planner. So my one planner was for everything. And I did predominantly use it first for studies as I was a student, and then for work when I started teaching and became a lecturer, because that, kind of took over a lot of my life. But I used it for other appointments and shopping lists and, kind of like anything that I needed to write down. And I think I didn't really give it too much thought until I started getting into planner videos and seeing other people's setups and finding out about this concept of using multiple planners, which I remember when I first heard about it, I was just like, more than one planner? Why? But then the idea grew on me. And the reason that it appealed to me was because I've really always made a division between study/work on the one hand, and then like kind of personal stuff on the other hand. So like, for example, I've always kept a division on my bookshelves between my study or work books and my other books. So I think this is pretty common. Probably a lot of people do this. So like I would have all of my language books and my books about Hebrew, which are, what I use. That's my field. So those are work books. And then, like, I don't know, novels or books on art history or things that are like just for fun and nothing to do with work, I would keep separately. Or emails. For years, I've had a division between my work emails and my personal emails. I mentioned this in another video that I did a few months ago on multiple planners, using multiple planners. So this is kind of following on from that one because it's focusing specifically on these two planners and the differences between them, as opposed to just using multiple planners on a kind of more general scale. So that's always something that's kind of appealed to me, and so it sort of came very naturally to me when I started to use multiple planners. It took me a few months to think of it, but then once I did, it just instantly clicked, because it had bothered me for a while, especially, like kind of when I got more into planning and the aesthetics of planning and how I wanted my planner to look, of using a single planner for everything. So when I was first using this Cousin, which is now my work planner, I was writing down, everything in it. So I was writing down things like I mentioned, like shopping lists and meetings with friends and all kinds of stuff like that. And it kind of bothered me. So I tried a few different things. I tried color coding, and that just for some reason didn't work for me, although I like the idea of it in principle. And I tried using like different symbols with the Hobonichi stencil. So like using, one symbol if it was like a sort of like a meeting with a friend, or going to Paper Chase, or checking the Doki Book website, or, something fun on the one hand, and if it was a work thing on the other hand. And I didn't like that either. I just didn't like how they were all like kind of jumbled together on the same page. And so when I started using a personal planner, it was really liberating, because I felt like, okay, now my planning system can be like the rest of my life already is, which is with a big division between work and personal. And it's kind of funny because being like kind of working in an academic job, you actually do have quite a lot of overlap between work and personal. So it might seem like an odd thing to do because, like, for example, I work from home a lot. So it's not like I have a big physical distinction between my, like, you know, work life and home life, because often they're just completely intermeshed. But for some reason, maybe that's why my brain likes to keep them separate. I'm not sure, but for whatever reason, I really like that division. So that's kind of the history of how it happened. So I think when I started using two different planners, it just felt right. It felt like that was the solution that I'd been looking for even before I knew that, you know, that there was a solution available. So what I started doing after I got the personal planner was just thinking this purely as a work planner, and everything to do with work goes in here, and other things that are not work related go in here. So, for example, what I keep in here. So there are a few different views. So if I'll just kind of go through the different views so that you can see what I mean. And because now that I've kind of reached a system that I really like with both of these, they're both Hobonichis. So they're actually quite compatible because they have a lot of the same layouts. So for example, they both have this vertical yearly layout, which I love. Obviously it looks a bit different in the cousin than in the weeks, but it's the same idea. So I use these completely differently. So this, as you know, if you've seen my cousin update, I use this as a kind of bird's eye view of the projects that I have going on for work, the sorts of things that I'm supposed to be working on. Up here are appointments and, like, you know, kind of timed events. And then down here are things that I just have to do myself, like writing projects, articles, books, that kind of thing. And I just use this to map out times, like when I'm supposed to be away, when I've got specific work appointments, days that I'm at home, so that I can see how much time I've got to allocate to research, that kind of thing. Whereas in my personal planner, I use this to track things like sleeping related things, when I've taken like antihistamines, and just like kind of completely non-work related, like personal tracking things, which would be very jarring to me if I were keeping them in here, because it's like, on the one hand, I've got a teleconference here, I'm going on a research trip here, I have a meeting here, and then this was like a day when I couldn't sleep, or do you know what I mean? Like, it would feel very disconcerting to me to have them all in the same place. And I really like just knowing that they're totally separate. And in fact, I didn't actually track a lot of these things until I got the personal planner, because it just never would have occurred to me to put that kind of stuff in here. But I find it really useful because there's some things that I just want to know, and I used to have to remember them. And as we all know, your brain is not a good filing system. I can't remember what the quote is, but it's like your brain is not a storage system. It's like you should be able to use it for thinking. So it's really convenient having a personal planner, because it's given me the opportunity to write down a lot of stuff which I like having written down, but I didn't have a place to put before. So another way that I like use these completely differently is in the monthly view. So obviously these both have a monthly view, and this is like my sort of overview schedule, I guess, kind of like a wall calendar. It's the same format. So this is like, when, again, appointments, this is just things that are going on. And then over here is things that I really have to remember to do that month, that I have to kind of keep sort of at the front of my mind. And I also have been using it as a sort of general map of my, like, project schedule for my current writing project. So it's totally like forward planning, just so that I can see if I'm free, if I have to book an appointment, that kind of thing. This is completely different. This I use as a mixture of, again, tracking. So this is exercise at the bottom. I was tracking water and then I stopped. And then I use it for planning YouTube videos, and also for keeping track of expenses, like non-essential expenses, like basically planner supplies, which is pretty much the only thing that I buy. But I do buy a lot of planner supplies. So totally different. And like, again, I would never put my YouTube video schedule in here. I don't know. It somehow seems to clash. Even before I was using two different planners, I didn't think to put my YouTube video schedule in here. But it's actually really nice having it because then I can see, like, you know, I sort of have an overview of the month. And again, like with exercise, I never used to track exercise because it somehow didn't seem to fit. I was at one point keeping a list of potential YouTube videos in the back of this just because I didn't have anywhere to put it before I had this planner, and it bothered me. It just felt somehow like it was wrong. So when I got the personal planner, I really felt like it was kind of answering a need, if you see what I mean. And then like down here, I use this to keep track of online orders that I'm waiting for. Again, that's something I never would have tracked before I had this, but I find it really useful having it. And it's because somehow in my head, this is for like forward planning and kind of mapping out projects. And if I wrote down orders, I don't think I did ever write them down. Like maybe if there was something that I was waiting for, I would note down, or that I was particularly worried about, I would note down when it shipped on a daily page, but I think generally I wouldn't. So I guess you could say that having a personal planner has made me track a lot more or write down a lot more things that obviously I was managing perfectly well beforehand without writing them down, but it's very nice to be able to write them down. So that's the monthly view. So you can see they're used totally differently. I don't use this for appointments at all because I put all of my appointments in here. And I put everything in here, whether it's a work appointment or not, because for this, I want to know if I'm free. So, for example, this was yesterday. I had a dreadlocks maintenance appointment because I've had my dreads for 3 months now and they were getting really unruly and messy. And so they came to do like kind of the first sort of like maintenance to like fix the loose hair and stuff like that. So I had that in here because, you know, I needed to know, even though this is not a work appointment, first of all, I needed to know that this isn't going to be a full day of work because I've got this kind of, I lose this time because of the dread appointment. And then also, if I needed to book a work appointment, I know that I can't book it on the 16th. So I need to know that kind of thing. So in here, I would write that down as well. So there is some overlap, but I wouldn't put it in the monthly view because I feel like I don't need the monthly view for that. So I would have that in the weekly view. And by the way, if you saw my last video on my week's update, thank you so much everybody for contributing, because I had this problem of having no color and I was like getting kind of there's no color. I was getting kind of depressed about it not having any color. So thank you to all of you, because everyone was like, you need color. So I've added the color in again. And thanks especially to the people who suggested using these highlighters and just doing them at the end of the day or something like that. So I started just putting these like kind of highlighting things at the end of the day, and I'm very happy to have color back. Anyway, so you can see here, this was yesterday, that well, maybe you can't see it because it's been colored in, but I had the dread maintenance appointment written in there as well, because that's the sort of thing, it is a personal appointment, it's not work, but I just need to know it in my work planner so that I don't double book things. So there is a bit of overlap, which I will go into a bit more again in a minute. But the work planner is basically kind of depending on the view, right? You've got this like kind of project overview, appointments, and then on my weekly schedule, this is where my kind of, you know, sort of all of the details of my week go. So again, I'll have, like, this was the dreadlocks appointment. This was a meeting that I had today. This is all like kind of just different stuff that I had to do for work. So a lot of this stuff is not going to be in here at all, because on my weekly view here, I have things like, we had to give Tails a bath. I put in my video schedule. I put in like, James was going to be out at a concert, recycling, things that I have to buy like coriander, oregano, beans, onions. I have to remember to cycle, all kind of stuff like that, which really has nothing to do with work. And so it doesn't need to be in here. So the only things really that have to be in both, I'd say, are appointments. I don't put work appointments in here because I think maybe after so many years of using one planner and having it be primarily work oriented, I'm still used to thinking of this as my main planner, and also it's bigger, so it's like it commands authority. But I don't put my work appointments in here because I feel like I would first check this, or I'd check the monthly view. And then if I was like arranging to, I don't know, meet with a friend or something, then I really wouldn't meet with them during the day probably. And unless it was a colleague, and then it would be a work thing anyway. And if it's in the evening, you know, like I'm never doing anything in the evening. So it's not like I have tons of non-work appointments and, you know, things going on. So basically if somebody is coming to visit, like say, I would put that in here. I might put it in here just so that I know that, like, you know, I can't work late that day or something like that. But if I have a work appointment, say like today I had these appointments, I wouldn't bother putting them in here because I'll be looking at this anyway, and I don't need to. So I do like kind of use these in conjunction with each other. So there is a certain amount of like kind of having to check two planners, but really not too much, because the things that need, like, everything is in here, because I don't want to mess up work, I guess. Like, I don't want to double book something. And because outside of that, there's not too much going on. Like, say if I wanted to book a vet appointment, I would check here, and then I would also check here, but like I would kind of know what was going on, and that it's not like I am such a socialite that I have, if you see what I mean. That's my point. So there's a certain amount of reduplication and a certain amount of checking both planners, but really not too much. So the things that go on the weekly view are like, normally I would have teaching if it was during term time, and then I would have, like, you know, other appointments with colleagues, meetings, all of that kind of stuff. And then also like notes for like emails, people that I have to get back to, stuff that I have to check, just anything that I have to remember to do that's work related. And so normally there's no need to, like, they're totally separate, because say like, the recycling goes out on Monday nights, but like my work planner doesn't care about that. It's totally irrelevant. So that's kind of how it works. And I feel like if I had to put in things like take out recycling here, it would kind of overwhelm me, because I would be a bit like, I have all of this stuff to do, and then I have to take out the recycling, and then where am I going to put all of these notes? It's like, I like knowing that I have all of this space just for work related things. I could kind of understand the argument. Some people say, like, you only have one life, so you should only have one planner. And I could understand how it might somehow be, in a way, more convenient just to be able to look at this and see everything that you have to do for the day. So it's like, okay, I have to do, let's say, I have this meeting, I have to phone these people, I have to take out the recycling, I have to buy these things. But I just like knowing that when I look in this, I know what I'm getting. I'm getting work stuff. And when I look at this, I'm getting other stuff. Another thing that I think is really, really helpful is that I've got notes pages in both of these. So all of the daily pages in my Cousin, I use for notes. So like, for example, here, I've mentioned this before, my current project is a bilingual edition of the first Shakespeare plays that were translated into Hebrew. So I'm using this for notes that I need for like sources that I have to check when I'm doing the translation. And it's really nice knowing that I have all of this space in my Cousin, and I can just use it for notes, whatever I need. I also do use it for things like keeping track of students' marks and other like kind of work related reference stuff that I'm going to need to keep checking. So that's what I use this for. Whereas the notes pages in here, I use for things like list of YouTube videos that I want to make, list of notes for YouTube videos, things that I'm thinking of buying, you know, like a wish list, and just kind of like general notes. So like, for example, when Panda was in hospital, we had to, you know, like we had like meetings with doctors and vets and cardiologists. And so I had like questions that I had to ask them in here. And I wouldn't have wanted to put stuff like that in here. Firstly, because it would have got hard to find, because I don't use this by date. I just use it as blank paper. So I use however many pages I need, and I just ignore these dates, which works if you're just using it for notes, because you finish one page, you go to the next page. I don't usually have to go back and reference these. If it's something that I'm going to have to check again, I put it at the end in the reference section. But if I was using it for a combination of work and personal things, that would get really confusing, because like say if I had notes about my translation project here, and then on the next page I had notes about questions to ask the vet, then I would be really confused, and it just I wouldn't be able to make that work. So like for example, notes for YouTube videos as well, like where would I put that? The only way I could do it would be to divide it into one side personal, one side work, which would then be confusing to me, because I would have to either like do it by date and say these are my notes for this day, and then maybe have notes following on from one day to the next, which would to me is more confusing than just having a whole page for whatever I want. Or I would somehow have to like kind of allocate. To me it's like somehow, I don't know, I'd rather have it in two different planners and know that all of my YouTube stuff is together here, rather than having it divided like that. So, or I guess the other way that you could do it is like, say you could just ignore the dates again and just say half of these notes pages are for work and half of them are for personal. You could do it like that. But it's somehow, because there's so many different things, I like having these different categories. I like knowing that this is where I keep all of my notes that are not work related, and this is where I keep all of my work related notes, if that makes sense. So basically every section is used for something different in both of these planners, but together it's all work and it's all personal. So it feels very contained to me. And like I said, the only overlap is that I put my non-work appointments in here just so I know when I can schedule things. So really, like, the benefits of keeping them separate, I feel like, is that I've got enough space in both. So I don't ever have the concern about running out of room, which is always something that I used to have beforehand. I would get really anxious about running out of room. And I know for some people the solution to that is to have undated planners or like a bullet journal. And there's something about, I've talked about this before, like I just can't do undated. I really, really like the security. It feels very comforting to me to have the dates already there. So having to work within a kind of set scheme, I guess, like to me is very comforting, but at the same time, you know, have to be careful that you don't run out of room. And so with this, I feel like I have enough room because I don't have my whole life in here. I just have my work life. And I've kind of tested this out over a year, and there's like absolutely no concern with running out of space. I always have enough space in the weekly view because like I said, I don't have to put in things like stuff that I, you know, like groceries to buy and recycling and vet appointments. And so I know that it's safe. Like there's enough room here for all of my work stuff. And then like the same thing here, I don't have to worry about work things here. So I know that there's enough room in here for everything. I've never had an issue running out of room. And so I really, really like that. And then another thing that I like, as I said, is just like kind of being able to do things like track in here, not have to worry about tracking in here, and just sort of focus when I open one of these planners, I know the sorts of things that I'm looking for and that I'm expecting to find. So I think potential pitfalls could be, or frustrations could be, you look at this, you see what you have to do, and then you look over in this one and you have a whole bunch of other tasks and you're like, oh yeah, I did have to take out the recycling and I have to email the vet and I have to phone the pet insurance and all of these things which I had no idea about when I was looking in this planner. So it's like you could feel like it sort of lulls you into a false sense of security because you're like, that's all I have to do. But you're only looking at half of your to-do list. I don't find that a problem because being a planner addict, I like looking at my planners. And so I really enjoy it. And I'm like, oh, now I get to look at this one. And now I get to look at this one. So I don't see it as a burden because I think really probably 2 is the limit. I feel like if I had more planners than that I had to consult on a daily basis, then it might get confusing because you're like, oh God, I have to look in that one as well. And I have to look in that one as well. But because, like I said, despite having all of the other planners, these are really the only 2 planners that I absolutely have to look at. The other things are not, either they're not planners, they're trackers, or like that really the home planner is the only other actual planner, and that only has stuff that is in one of these, right? It's only like a satellite planner, as I keep saying. So I think just having it spread between the two of them is totally manageable, and I've never missed anything because I looked in here and didn't look in here. It's just that it's, I think if you get into the habit, it's exactly like email. I feel like I don't miss personal emails because I only looked at my work email and didn't check my personal email because I know that I have 2 email accounts. What does happen sometimes is that I prioritize. So like for me, often work stuff takes priority, both with email and with the planners. So I'll always check my work email like all the time, which is probably I don't know, a bad thing. I don't know what that says about the priorities, but like it's rare that I have a really urgent email on my personal account. So I'll often like check my work email a lot, and then I might leave the personal email because I'm not really worried that there might be something that I have to deal with straight away. And sometimes it's the same with my planner. So sometimes, especially when I'm like kind of out and have a lot more stuff going on, like appointments and meetings and things like that, than when I'm at home. When I'm at home, it's usually the opposite. So recently, because I've been on research leave and I've been at home, I know what I'm doing. I'm doing this one project, and I just get up in the morning and then, start working, like get my laptop out and start working on it. And so I don't have a lot of work appointments, and it's not like, oh, I have to be here and then I have to be here and then I have to phone this student. It's like, I don't really have that very much at the moment. So there's not a lot that I have to check in here. It's more for me to use when I want to chart out my schedule for the day. Whereas in this one, I'll have more things like phoning people, emailing people, sorting stuff out, ordering stuff. And so I end up actually checking this more. So it kind of goes back and forth depending on the situation. But I never just completely forget to check one. I always check both of them, like, a few times a day at least. So I don't really feel like there are any downsides to it. I guess the only downside to it is that sometimes I have to bring them both out with me. So ideally, I would like, when I left the house, just to be able to take this, especially now that it's my wallet as well. Like that would really cut down on space in my bag. And if I'm at home, if I'm working at home and I'm just going out like to the high street to go to the shops, or I'm going to meet a friend or something like that, then I don't bring this with me because this is obviously heavier. But if I'm going into university, then I absolutely need this. And then I have to take both of them in because I feel like, well, even before it was my wallet, but obviously now that it's my wallet, I need to have this one with me. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to have something that was really lightweight. And so that's why the Weeks is perfect, because it's got everything in it and yet it's, very compact. So it doesn't add a lot of bulk. But with the two of them, like having to schlep this around is like probably kind of stupid. But I don't know how to get around it. And if I was only using one planner, I would be using this, and this is most of the weight. So this doesn't add a huge amount. So I'd say that's probably the only downside, is that it does kind of frustrate me sometimes that I have to carry them both with me, but it's not enough to make it unworthwhile. Like I still feel like the positives outweigh the negatives, because that's really the only negative. I guess to me, it's kind of similar to having different sections in a ring planner. So if you had like a file of facts or something, and you had a work section and a personal section, you could make the work section as big as you wanted. You could have like, a calendar, and then you could have notes and to-dos and all kinds of stuff. And then you could have like, sub-tabs. And then you could also have a personal section where you had a calendar and to-dos and YouTube notes and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's how I think of it. The only difference is that these are just two separate entities and they're not in the same volume, just because I like having bound planners. But I feel like that's how it works. And I don't think that seems as odd to people. I mean, I know that like a lot of you are the same and you have different planners, so it's not like you find it odd anyway, but somehow I think in some ways the idea of having different sections in a ring planner seems much more natural than having completely different planners for different things. Although really I think it's the same concept. It's just that we want to have some kind of division between different parts of our life so that we don't get confused. And that's how it works for me. So On the whole, I really like this system, and I prefer it to having one planner with everything in it, because like I said, it gives me more room, it makes it easier to focus on different things at different times, and it just kind of keeps everything nicely organized. So I hope that you found that enjoyable, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back again soon with another video.